Good morning to friends of the Museum of South Texas History, and welcome to the November 2021 edition of Museum Pláticas. My name is Francisco Guajardo. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the museum and the host of Museum Pláticas. And today I want to tell you about this terrific program we're about to have. We have two very special guests. The first guest is a retired Army veteran who works at the museum. His name is Juan Gonzáles, and he happens to be from Mercedes, Texas. And so Juan, we call him Johnny, works here at the museum, and he's got a treasure trove of stories that he will share from. And so really looking forward to my plática with Johnny. After our plática with Johnny, then we will bring on a fellow who's a World War II veteran. A man who grew up in Harlingen, graduated from Harlingen High School, and then in 1941 volunteered to become a member of the United States Army. And so his name is Eugene Gutierrez. Mr. Gutierrez is 100 years old, and he just drove to the museum from his McAllen home and came to the museum, shows up on time, shows up ready to engage in a plática this morning. And so Mr. Gutierrez will be our third segment and our longer segment for the morning on our November 2021 Museum Plática. So when we come back, you will be joined by Juan Gonzáles. So stay tuned. Okay, welcome back, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. I just got off the phone actually with Mr. Gutierrez's daughter, and you heard me with Elizabeth. And so, Elizabeth, I told you to go to Facebook Live and also to YouTube. You can go on there to see your father, who's about to come on shortly. But now I have Juan Gonzáles. Johnny, it's such a pleasure and a privilege to have you on this program. And so the reason that you're here is because at the Museum of South Texas History, which is now 51 years old, the museum, we have an exhibit for Veterans Day, which is about to come down next week. But we wanted to, on the 11th of November, to really honor veterans and to leave an exhibit, a temporary exhibit up for a while. And the exhibit has a lot of you at the center of it. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to how your life as a veteran shows up in our exhibit here at the museum?
Well, sure. First of all, I'd like to thank you for having me on the program, and I hope everybody's watching it because I'm actually pretty excited about our next guest. But before we get there, um, I started out a career in the military looking for a change in life, and through that career, I amassed quite a few mementos during that time. And that's kind of what we have here on display, kind of a snapshot of what a lot of our service men and women uh, go through, experience, and some of the things that are on display may bring back some memories for folks, which is good because that's what we want to have. We want to have a memory and maybe possibly a discussion about things. There's a lot of heroes here in the valley, a lot, and all we have to do is listen to them.
Mm. So Johnny, there's a there's this whole backstory of you. You know, when I got to know you a little bit, because you actually came into the museum first, I think, as like a volunteer.
Correct.
And then, you know, you really showed your mettle, you're hardworking, you're interested, very engaged. And so at one point we thought, hey, you know, Johnny, would you like to work here, right? And you said, yeah, I'd love to work here. But there's a connection here between Juan Gonzalez, his upbringing, and museums. What's the story there, Johnny?
Well, the story is it's quite fascinating. I grew up as a migrant farm worker, and we would travel to Ohio and sometimes Michigan to do some work up there. Well, the area that we worked in Ohio was very rich with relics of the past, and a lot of these relics were arrowheads, old coins, peace pipes, stuff like that. And there's something about discovering something on your own, especially as a child with a very wide imagination. And that was kind of one of the first things that started drawing me towards the museum and this field. And the other part was as in one of the migrant summer schools that I was at up there, they took us to a museum up there, and it was an eye-opening experience for me. Never having been to one before, and I must have been in fourth grade at the time, and to this day I still remember that museum very vividly. And
What museum was that?
it was the Rutherford B. Hayes Museum, the Presidential Museum.
So you're 9 years old, maybe 10, and you're a kid from Mercedes, Texas, whose family was part of the migrant stream, and your school, through a migrant program, takes you to the Rutherford B. Hayes Museum in which town?
Fremont, Ohio.
In Fremont, Ohio.
Correct.
And so you're this wide-eyed kid. You walk into the museum, and the emotion, the experience, the memory was captivating for you.
Very much so.
And so that, I mean, what were you thinking at the moment? Wow, museum, I'd like to work in a place like this, or what?
Well, what was most captivating is the museum offered an explanation for all their exhibits. So I readily read all the labels that were out there and got more information. And that's what I realized, that the museum is a nice thing to have, and because it talks to people about multi-generations that we've had here in our country. So it was a great opportunity. When I was offered a job here, I thought I would have to leave the valley to pursue a career in the museum field. But I'm glad that I have that opportunity, and
Wow.
had nothing but fun here.
So this idea of you thought maybe I'm going to have to leave the world, you actually leave the valley. You actually did leave the valley.
Correct.
And so you left the valley when you must have been like a strapping 18-year-old or something, right? I mean,
Yes.
take us back to then. You graduated from high school. You had your plan to do what, and what was it that you did?
Well, I graduated high school, and I wasn't exactly set on going to school. I wanted to take a break. I wanted to see the world, and during that time, the Cold War was still in full effect, and I thought, what better way to go than to sign up with the Army and see the world. And I did see the world, but probably in a little different circumstance than vacationing. But all in all, I don't regret any of my time in the military. It's a wonderful experience, 20 years of memories. And I'm glad that I was able to go through all that and make it home safe.
When you say you saw the world, tell us what you saw. You saw this, Iraq. You saw this, Afghanistan. You saw this. What did you see, Johnny?
Well, in a lot of the places that we went to, I did see a lot of extreme poverty. And it kind of speaks to the nature of the world that we live in now. Coupled with this poverty is also the knowledge that you're in harm's way, and so even though you have thoughts about what you're doing there, you have to be careful when you're out there doing your job. I've been to Africa as well, a very desolate, dry area, and they have the same problems there. Part of the reason that took me to Africa was we were there on a mission to restore hope, which was the name of the operation. And
Is this Mogadishu?
yes, Somalia, and during the Battle of Mogadishu. So there was there's a lot to see out there in the world. I know there's a lot of famous places that people like to go visit. I unfortunately didn't get to see a lot of those places, but I did experience a world that we typically don't see in the news.
When we started this Plática, Johnny, you said that there are a lot of people from the valley who are heroes.
Correct.
There's something particular about this part of the world where, and we'll see when Mr. Gutierrez comes on to have a Plática with you, that there's something about this part of the world that sort of nurtures a sense of country and patriotism. Can you speak to that a little bit, through your own kind of life and professional and military experience?
Sure. Typically, the valley falls into a kind of a gray zone where we don't really, well, some of us may feel that we don't really belong to Mexico and we don't really belong to Texas. But to alleviate that, I think for most people is they find it in themselves to show that they are full-blooded American by showing their patriotism and enlisting in the armed services. And that, in essence, is a stepping stone to future success, because you're doing something that typically most people won't even think of doing. And through the various assignments, you get a wide array of knowledge. You're able to handle large budgets. So you get all these life experiences while you're in the military that help you when you get out and transfer over to the civilian world. So as a little plug here, I'd like to say that if there are people out there that own a business, they should really consider hiring a veteran, because they will not let you down, and they're always there ready to do the task at hand.
Well, I can offer a personal testimonial that not only have you not let us down, but you have brought such value to this museum as a worker who's loyal, hardworking, skilled, and who brings this refreshing energy every single day. You're always looking for, how can I help? And you don't ask for people, or you don't look for people to ask. You just go and you do it. Mm-hmm. And so that's been terrific. Johnny, thank you so much for your service. I want to ask you this question. How do you feel about bringing on Eugene Gutierrez onto this table here? Because he's next. What's going on in here for you?
My heart's pounding through my chest, even though you can't see it. It's an extreme honor to have a primary source available from World War II, from the 1st Special Service Brigade, the forerunner to the Green Berets. What an honor. And that's what I'm talking about here in the Valley. We have these people here. We just need to be able to listen.
Wow. So when we come back, we will be joined by Eugene Gutierrez, who will help us to grace this space. So stay with us. Okay, welcome back, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. If you're trying to get on this program, well, you can probably see us, but I'm hoping that if you're efforting and maybe don't get us clearly enough, we are broadcasting live through Facebook Live. You just go to the Museum of South Texas History. Actually, it's YouTube. Pam is telling me through YouTube through our YouTube channel. So you go to YouTube and Museum of South Texas History, and you can get this program. But if you're seeing us, you're already on there, I suppose. So we just had a conversation, a plática, Johnny and I. And so Johnny is retired Army after 20 years of service. And so I said to Johnny, we're going to bring on Mr. Gutierrez. And so aquí está el señor Gutierrez. How about that?
Aquí estamos. That's
Mi-
awesome.
Mis-
This is truly an honor for me. I want to thank you personally. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts.
Awesome.
Mr. Gutierrez, I'd like to set you up, and then I'm going to pose the first question. And then after that, it's going to be a conversation that you and Johnny will have.
Okay.
But so the first question for you, and then I got a follow-up here, is about if you could give us your name and when you were born and where you were born.
Okay. I'm Eugene Gutierrez. I was born September 14, 1921 in Harlingen. These are the days that the doctor would come to the house to deliver. So I came from a family of 7 siblings, 4 sisters and 3 men, 3 males out of this home. I was grew up during the Depression when times were very tough. We had to provide a lot of things on your own. I remember one of the things that strikes my mind is in the old days, we used, because of the economy, 7 of us to be fed, clothed, and taken care of. I would wear tennis shoes most of the time because they were easy, cheap at that time, and very easy on your feet. So that was one of the things. The other one that had to do was food. Food was very scarce. I remember at one time I went through the Salvation Army food line at a railroad station in Harlingen. So we took every opportunity to feed ourselves and look ahead because things were very tough. My dad grew up in outside of Harlingen in the ranching business. His father and mother established a little ranch southwest of Harlingen, and they were raising cattle there during the Depression. They had some hard times because in the year 1900 there was a very heavy drought throughout South Texas, and people who were in the cattle business, which was the main, there was no irrigation as we know it here now for crops, so they relied mostly on selling cattle to the people that used to drive them up the country, up to Kansas City, those big places. And in fact, in the year 1900 marks where many families went broke because the drought, there was no grass for the cattle and no place for them to drink water. So like in my family, my ancestors, they had over, I think they had over 200 head of cattle, and they perished all because of the conditions of the drought.
Wow. So what you're saying, Mr. Gutierrez, is very much in keeping with the broader history of the region, as you are describing a family struggle with the drought and all of that. And so, because as you look at 1900, and then you look at 1904 with the coming of the railroad, you look at a time period between 1900 and 1904 of dramatic social change, where ranching is sort of giving way to agriculture.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was because some of the leaders of the region were seeing ranching as a way where not where you could create great wealth to create modern, cities and those kinds of things. And so the story you tell is a story that is a family story right in the middle of this social change.
Yeah.
Mr. Gutierrez, I want to ask you about I'm going to jump forward a little bit
Okay.
here, if I may. You graduated from Harlingen High School in 1941,
That's right. Yes.
and then you volunteered right after high school.
Yes, in August. School was over, well, let's say June, and a lot of my other friends, they were joining up. There was no war at that time, and I decided, well, I'm kind of like the lone wolf here. All of my buddies and my relatives that were of age were already signing up, and there was in fact there was no talk about war. The only thing that was mentioned was England fighting the Germans and Hitler taking country after country. So I volunteered, and I joined what was at that time the Army Air Corps. There was no Air Force at that time, and the reason I joined was I knew that educating 7 siblings on a meager salary that my father was receiving. Prior to that, let me go back a little bit. He had a lot of customers who were farmers or cattle people at that time, and sometimes those people would come and try to buy groceries with cattle, And the thing that went bad was a drought. After the drought, they couldn't pay you, so at times he would open credit to a farmer with children growing up, and they would pay accordingly, to their sales of cattle, or they did some that did little farming, but it wasn't extensive due to the lack of water supply, and they had a hard time even to put food on the table. So I decided, well, I'm going to join the Army, and for 3 years, so I signed up for 3 years, and hope in those 3 years I can save education money. The salary at that time was $21 a month for a private. That's when you came into the military. So I was also able to help at home to my family at that time, because there was some assistance that you would not donate, but have a certain amount of money taken out of your $21, and the government would match that, and then they would send a check to my mother at home, and that's how they survived some of the days during the Depression.
So you just spoke to the very real decision of joining the military because it would create economic opportunity
Yeah.
for your family.
Yeah.
Does that resonate, Johnny?
Yes, it does. My time in basic training and advanced training in airborne school, I send every single one of my checks to my parents, so I wouldn't have to worry about them.
Johnny, you and I think, have read the letters together, I think, or maybe you've been around when we've read through the letters of Freddie Gonzáles that he sent back to his mother from Vietnam, where the references are repeated of, "Mom, I'm sending my check to you."
Yeah.
Wow.
I guess it's a traditional thing.
Yeah. Mr. Gutierrez, the story of you going to chapel on the 7th of December, of 1941. Is there a story there that you recall?
The chapel.
Yeah, did you go to church
Yes.
one
yes.
morning?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell the story of how that happened. And then there's a photograph that you have of the very day when you were very dressed up as if you had gone to church.
Well, maybe, am I there in that picture with my mother?
It's that picture.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I was already in the service when that came out. You could wear your civilian clothes anytime you wanted to on weekends, and so I got dressed to go to mass at the chapel there at Brooksfield, and you can see how well dressed I am.
Tell the story of the day, including the presidential address.
Okay. There were two other friends of mine that joined the military at the same time I did. We trained together during basic training, and we were assigned to the Air Corps at Brooksfield. And it was a Sunday, I know, that day. It was around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were either playing cards or something. We were self-entertainment system there. And so then all of a sudden the radio stops, says an important announcement that's coming over right now. Pearl Harbor has been attacked by the Japanese. And that was quite a blow. And then shortly after that, the president came on about the Day of Infamy. And of course, nobody knew what to do, so they secured all the gates. You couldn't go or come in at that time.
That would change the world.
Yeah.
Talk about how it changed you.
Well, as far as my personal changeover at that moment, it was unknown what was going to be the next step. So everything was on high alert, and security was pretty stringent, very hard to go or come into the base. So that was one of the reasons that when I was at Brooksfield, I wanted to transfer out of there because you go to downtown San Antonio, there on I think Houston Street, one of the main streets, and it seemed like thousands of officers walking also there. So what was happening was every step you take, you'll be saluted, and so it says, I got to get out of here, or not go to town, or stay away from the downtown district in San Antonio.
Too much brass around, huh?
Pardon?
Too much brass around.
Yeah, that's right.
Brass is a term that we use for
Because,
officers.
you know, there were hundreds of cadets taking flight training at Randolph Field at that time. So that worked out. And while I was there, I occupied myself. I went to a tech school there on base, and went into the parachute business, learning how to pack parachutes, how to repair them. So the instructor put me through all the phases of parachute maintenance. So that was the only thing that he didn't do was take us up and make a free jump. It was too early.
So, Mr. Gutierrez, I'd like you and Johnny to look at the photograph that everybody's seen through our YouTube channel. And so, Johnny, what kind of reaction do you have to that photograph, and how do you want to ask Mr. Gutierrez your question?
Okay. First of all, that I recognize that pose anywhere.
Yeah, okay.
And right there, what you're getting ready to do is practice a parachute landing fall, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So while you were a rigger, you said you all put chutes together, and you went through the whole process.
Yeah.
You were known as a rigger.
Right, yeah.
And that's a very important position, especially in the airborne community,
Yeah.
because these guys are the ones that are packing all our chutes.
Yeah.
And nowadays, riggers have to, when they pack their chutes, they have to select one of the chutes that they pack and jump with it.
Well, we did the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things don't change anymore
Yeah,
very much.
they, there's a little ticket on the side, or well, under the parachute.
Correct.
And there you signed who packed it, when, and the date.
Mm-hmm.
And the parachute officer, when he was ready, he says, "All right, you go pick your one of your chutes and bring it over."
Yeah.
And we had to prove that my name was, or initials were on that tag.
Yeah.
And
Big responsibility, right?
so this, when we joke about it, says, well, that means that if it chute doesn't open, you can come back and get another one.
So did your airborne training help you make the decision to volunteer for the first special
yes,
service?
Yes, it did, because it was going to be an airborne unit, and of course, I was. They had recruiters from within the force headquarters, which was just barely getting off the ground, and they would go to large military installations, and then they got hold of all the parachute riggers through the chain of command, and they went to those military installations to select and recruit riggers for the
Because the riggers plays a vital role in airborne operations. I mean, basically, it's just like the aircraft. If you don't have a pilot, you can't jump out of planes.
That's right.
So when you arrived at Helena, Montana, to start your training there, what did you think?
Well, I was in a way happy to get away from the busy city of San Antonio, and but then we started the qualification of jumpers.
Mm-hmm.
There was some discussion because the normal qualification was 5 jumps, I think.
Correct.
And here we established our own jump school. In fact, that's a mock-up installation there.
The C-17?
Just like the inside of a plane inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling Sergeant here that we had orders, and the parachute officer was very specific. Says, if you're in combat and you get into that position, ready to jump at the door, because above that there's some lights. There's a green light and a red light. See, when that green light, you better move. And then the jump master was to one side. I think he was on my right there.
Mm-hmm.
And you were hooked up. And if you hesitated in combat to jump, they would shoot you right there on the spot and push your body out of the way, because you were putting in danger. Let's say there were 50 men jumping in this jump.
Chalk.
And if you have a greater space in between, you're leaving this group over here in a very bad situation. The same thing with this, see. So that was one of the Army regulations, and it was within the right of the jump master to shoot you.
Well, we don't shoot them anymore, but we do give them a swift kick in the rear end to get them out the plane if we need to. But that's great. So after you did your training and you all arrived in Italy, Can you tell me a little bit about Anzio and Monte Cristo? Those were some harrowing events.
Well, prior to that, our first military operation was in the Aleutian Islands
Okay.
when the Japanese were conquering the string of islands that from the tip of Alaska, run, I think, about 1,500 miles before it reaches the coast of, I think it was the coast of Japan. And the Japanese were already supplying two bases in the Aleutian Islands. One was Kiska, the other one Attu, if you remember that. We had to, well, the Attu, the battle for Attu took place sometime in February, about 1940, I think it was 43. The Japanese had already bombed they had already dropped bombs in Alaska at the tip of it. So there was an urgency to capture that island back, and there was an invasion at that time in February, I believe, of 43, to drive the Japanese out.
Wow. So you went from one end of the world to the
other. Yeah. We were a very highly mobile unit because we were only 1,800 combat and 600 support troops. And I remember going, when we left California, we had 3-4 troop trains for 2,600 men, which is a lot of space, but to keep the security of it, a lot of the trains were split up into 4 or 5 different ones, and some of them would head into Canada, some south, so that the spies or security would not be able to guess what we were doing. And we get to California, we go to Angel Island, which is just near Alcatraz. And we were there getting ready, reissued equipment. We didn't know which way we were going, but when they said it's going to be cold, a lot of people says, "Oh, we're not going to Hawaii temperature." No, we're not. So we got we had 3 carriers. We were divided into 3. And they were the, what they call at that time, a big shipbuilder in the West Coast. They used to call them Victory vessels, I think. And those things were terrible as far as balancing. So we boarded them, and I remember going under the big bridge, the
Golden Gate.
Golden Bridge, yeah. And you could see the people look this small when you look up, and the cars and everything. I says, boy, that's a high place to jump from. So we started on the trip out of Berkeley. Well, not Berkeley, but the big base that's inside of the land there. And as we were sailing toward the islands, nobody knew which way it was. I think on the 5th day they told us which way we were headed, because there was a Japanese announcer. I forgot what they call her, Tokyo Sally, I think.
Tokyo
Rose.
Tokyo Rose, there we go.
Rose.
Yeah, I remember her.
Yeah. And she came over the radio, says, I know you guys are heading toward the Aleutian Islands. Well, you better turn back because they're going to kill every one of you by the time you get there. So that was putting fear into propaganda.
Yeah, a little bit of the psychological warfare.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's interesting. So after you were done in the Aleutians, after that is when you went to Anzio and
Well, yeah, they brought us back to the States toward the middle or toward the 2/3 of the month of August, and most of us got a delay en route furlough. So I went home for a few days, and then I had to report back to Vermont, which was our home base at that time. And from there on, we boarded within 2 weeks. We were already on the way to Fort Norfolk to board those ships. So when we boarded them, we left the docks there about 5 o'clock. It wasn't quite dark at that time, so here were 3 troop carriers full of men, and in front of us there were a lot of destroyers, the small ones, and I remember they go around, and some on the side, some in the back, because of the danger of submarines. There were a lot of submarines at that time, and especially they wanted to kill Americans, and that was the easiest way to kill a lot of people. They torpedo their boats, and so as we kept moving, it got dark, and I remember thinking about this. Well, we're going to be pretty safe with that many patrols out in front of us all around. They'll be able to detect a submarine as it comes through. Well, the next morning we go topside, and there's no escort. I says, "Oh my, what happened here?" We started thinking, well, we're going to be vulnerable for submarines. And then we asked one of the crew members, says, "How come we don't have the support that we did when we left Norfolk?" Says, "Well, a lot of people don't know, but this ship you're in, it was a British passenger ship that was converted for carrying troops, and that ship could go over 30 knots an hour."
wow, it's pretty fast.
So he
back
says,
then.
because I noticed everybody did, the ship would go back, make a left turn here, go for 30 or 40 seconds, then a right, and then left zigzag.
Yeah.
And he says, "Just watch that." So we did, and he says, a submarine cannot keep up with your ship.
Especially if it's underwater.
Yeah.
Because it goes a lot
So
slower.
they couldn't torpedo one of those ships because they're
Well-
constantly changing directions,
Good thing you were on a faster boat.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Gutierrez, you mentioned that you came home for a few days. This would have been about 1943 when everybody was sent home. In between,
He's talking after the Aleutians.
after the Aleutians and before Norfolk.
Yeah.
And so, what do you remember about coming home for those few days? I'm guessing you came to Harlingen.
Yes, yes.
So, what were those days like? The interactions you had, how people were talking about the war, what you brought back in terms of information that you could share, information you could not share.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we couldn't ever give the name of the unit we were with because it was a secret unit, say. I remember coming home slightly because I got into the railroad station there in Harlingen about when the train arrived in from I think of Houston, and I don't recall exactly, but I had to get in a cab to take me home because I had on heavy my equipment with me, and they, of course, they were glad to see me, and I was glad to come home.
You were 22, more or less.
I think I was, 21, 22.
21, 22.
Yeah, at that time.
Wow. I before Johnny asks the next question, very curious to know what it's been during the past 70 years that has kept your mind so sharp about the stories you're telling. Are these stories that you tell often, that you've written? But how are the stories and the memories so clear and so searing the way you describe them?
Yeah. Well, maybe that's one of the genes in my body there. But I do remember a lot of things. In fact, I remember when I was a little kid, I was at my father's grocery store, and we had to we had a milk cow at home that my mother would milk, and I was in charge of taking care of the grazing of the animal. And there was a gentleman that helped my father with certain assignments, and one of his was taking care of the cow. So he says, we're going over to the canal for a dip, to dip the animal for ticks or whatever it was. And we had to go maybe about 16 blocks to this location. And I remember as we were walking, this friend says, how come you're kind of Martian? You're not in the military, are you? Of course, I was maybe 12 years old. Says, well, I like the military. So it goes back to the old days.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
When you were talking about your experience during December 7th, 1941, the day of infamy, you took me back. You took me back to 9/11. In 9/11, I experienced something similar to what you would have experienced during the attack on Pearl Harbor. What brought it forth was how you were talking about how they locked up base and you couldn't go anywhere, stuff like that. I was at Fort Bragg during that time. I was a paratrooper there in the 82nd, and the morning after the attack, it took me about 9 hours to get on post because they brought out all the MPs and they were physically going through all the cars, even if you had your ID card or your tag to get into base. So you talking about your experience reminded me of that experience back then.
Yeah.
And after 9/11, we knew what was coming. And we had to prepare, just same way you all had to prepare. So ours might have, I think you would think that ours might have been a little easier. I was reading a part of the history, and the lieutenant colonel that was in charge of the brigade actually did his own parachute jump, and basically everybody in that group that was with him did basically a one-day airborne crash course. And so a lot of these guys, typically it takes 3 weeks to go through airborne training. So a lot of these guys had 1 day to train, and out the plane you go. That would have been quite an experience.
Well, our CO, Colonel Fredericks, who was a force commander, he took, they gave him a 2-hour orientation. And then, but he wanted to prove one point to his men, that he was one of us. And with such a short notice, he went up and made a jump after 2 hours of instruction. He got on one of those mock-ups,
Yep.
and they told him what to do, how to roll, and how to keep your feet together and things like that.
Feet and knees together.
Yeah, and of course our shoes were pretty tough
Yeah,
compared
yeah,
to yours.
Yeah.
You could land yours easier
Mm-hmm.
because I had one that dragged me, I don't know, a couple of blocks. I couldn't stop it.
It's pretty hard to release those
Yeah.
parachutes back then.
And if
Yeah.
you run fast enough to spill the chute over so it won't be holding air,
Mm-hmm.
and that would stop it, but they couldn't do it because if you would turn loose of the shroud lines, you'd be dragged down the...
Yeah, once they get full of air, they can be pretty
they
strong.
can move, yeah, especially if the wind is 15, 20 knots,
Mm-hmm.
miles.
So in all, how many jumps did you conduct?
I made, I think, 5 jumps.
5 jumps?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We qualified with 2 jumps.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's 5 jumps for them
5
to
jumps.
qualify. They
Is
got to
that
do
right?
some with combat equipment, some without, and
Yeah.
also night jumps.
Altitude, too.
Altitude. So that's great.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. So,
The jump school at Fort Benning, when they found out we were getting by with 2, they start complaining.
yeah, they did. I guess they didn't want anybody else running their school, right?
Yeah,
Well, those times call for different measures.
yeah.
So going back to what we were talking about earlier, you talked about the Aleutians and leading up to your arrival to Italy and to start off the campaign in Anzio and fighting up through Monte Carlo. How stiff was the resistance?
Pretty bad, pretty rough. See, the Germans had some of their top divisions in the Italian campaign.
Mhm.
And of course, we outsmarted them. For example, this high peak that the Germans had control. I don't know if you recall, maybe the Liri Valley is flat,
Correct.
and it runs maybe from Naples all the way up to Monte Cassino. It's pretty flat because that was a big farming area. Well, any group of invasion for the high peak, there was only one way to get to them, and that was to climb the high peak up to the point.
Yeah.
But that could never be accomplished because the Germans, their artillery and their optics, everything, they knew exactly which way they were going, so they would just lay down fire and pretty heavy. And they would concentrate on groups all the side of the mountain. There were 2 divisions that tried to climb up.
Yeah, I believe one of the divisions was 10th Mountain Division.
I don't know, but I know that 36 was one of them, I think.
Okay.
I think there was another 4th division,
Yeah. Okay. 4th ID.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that tried to make the attack to the peak, and they just couldn't do it. I mean, men were falling right and left.
Yeah. And I read in some of in my research for our interview, I read that that area had pinned down divisions for a long time, and
Oh, yeah.
you all were able to clear that area
Yeah.
in less than 2 weeks.
No, there was a general, American general, that said, "You guys are going to get killed over there, and you can't do it like this, you know." So our commander and 2 scouts left the staging area at dusk, just when it was dark enough that they couldn't see any movement. And they went all the way up to the back of that Monte Cassino, not Monte Cassino, but the mountain,
Where the Abbey was?
yeah,
that
no,
the-
that's the Monte Cassino.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes my mind goes.
Oh, it's okay. So they
sideways.
made it to the top to do their reconnaissance?
No, they went all the way down to the base of it,
Oh, okay.
and then they came back to work on the plans to go. So they selected, there were 3 regiments. They selected the 2nd regiment to do the main assault.
Mhm.
The other 2 stayed back as a
Reserve and...
reserve, yeah. And they left at dusk, loaded with equipment, mostly ammunition, because far power was very important at that range. So at dawn the next morning, they couldn't move anymore. The weather was, I think, about 20 degrees, cold, freezing. And the guys, they were told to lay down flat. There was weeds and other shrubs there. Don't move at all. You're gonna have to stay there. You do whatever you have to do if you need to go to the bathroom or whatever. And some of those guys that were on the ground there, I wasn't in on that operation. Their clothes were frozen to whatever
the
they
turf.
were on. Yeah,
Yeah.
they couldn't move at all. I mean, it was either live or die. But and to expose yourself, it would be very hazardous for the operation to go through.
Yeah.
So they were able to crawl, and then all day they were in one position, freezing weather, rainy weather. At dusk, they were able to get up and keep moving. And they got to the base of the Mount La Defensa, is the name. And they had 5 of the men who were highly regarded as being able to tie the ropes, climb up without it making any noise in the dark.
Wow.
That
That's
was
impressive.
tough.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So then the main group started climbing the ropes at dark. It was quite an operation that those people that were able to do it deserve a lot of credit,
That's great.
because the traffic on that main highway from Naples to Rome was completely controlled by the
The German.
Germans. No vehicles, nothing could get in there.
Well, they had everything arranged out
Yeah.
with their artillery.
Yeah, and they could see for miles and miles.
Yeah. Wow, quite an experience.
I have Johnny, Mr. Gutierrez. I'm communicating with Elizabeth, your daughter.
Oh, okay.
She's asking a question.
Oh, okay, okay.
Elizabeth is asking to ask you about Germany and about the special forces, and she wants you to tell the story about the movie The Devil's Brigade with William Holden,
Okay.
and because apparently you were a consultant on that movie. Is this true?
No.
Or maybe
Well, I don't remember.
something else, maybe, but
Yeah,
but about the true picture of the special forces in the Devil's Brigade. So maybe you can hold on to that question, because I think you were going to lead in, right, with a discussion here on
Yeah.
the Devil's Brigade.
The
Yeah.
Devil's Brigade. And that's where I was going towards.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen the movie. I've seen it numerous times.
Yeah.
The Devil's Brigade with William Holden, and a lot of the training that I saw them do there, and what fascinated me was the camaraderie that established between the Canadians and the Americans.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, a little bit. When the Canadians came in, you know, the troop trains came right into the fort, Harrison, and as they made their formation, they came. Some had short pants. I don't know what do you
The
call
little
them?
cocky short pants
Yeah,
that they used to
yeah.
wear. Mhm.
And they look kind of funny, see, and we were by the side, and we started snickering at them, making fun of them, you know. And they didn't like that. Of course, they couldn't break drinks either to come over and punch you.
So I'm sure it was a challenging training initially, because there is that kind of spirit de corps,
Yeah.
kind of. You have the camaraderie, but you also kind of, hey, we Americans are better.
Yeah.
No, Canadians say no, we
Well,
are better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because in the training, we were trying to outdo the Canadians, you know, and they were trying to outdo us
Yeah.
at the same time, which was healthy.
Oh yeah,
Healthy.
it's good for training.
Atmosphere, yeah. And I remember Saturday nights, especially payday, they were rough in town. I bet one time, I remember all the bars were full all the time there on Saturday nights. And there were fights between Americans and Canadians, fighting in a bar, or they go outside to the back of the bar or out on the street and fight.
And the irony, they fight against each other, but then they work together as a
Yeah,
team
that's right.
to defeat the Nazis.
Yeah. Now, there's a bar there in Helena.
Hmm.
What's the name of it? The Golden Bar.
Okay.
And many times there were a lot of fights inside. In fact, they had a free-for-all there one weekend, and they broke bottles of liquor, they broke glasses, windows, and everything, furniture. It was pretty desperate, pretty bad.
I'm sure you had no part in that, right?
No, I wasn't. I had part in another one. And this was one December, Christmas holidays. I had a pass. A lot of us got passed to spend the day in downtown Nice.
Hmm.
And one of the things was this big bar. I don't know, it must have been 200 people there, Americans.
Mhm.
And part of that group were the Japanese regiment,
Hmm.
the Nisi. And something happened between one of our men and one of their men, and they started fighting. Before you knew it, everybody was chairs, everything was blowing all the way. So I snuck out the back door when the whistles start coming. The
Oh yeah,
MPs
the
were coming.
MPs.
So, Mr. Gutierrez, we're gonna do this. We're gonna pause for a little bit
Okay.
because I think that we need to refresh your cup of coffee.
Yeah.
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 And so we're gonna pause for maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes, and then we're gonna come back with the final segment.
Okay.
Okay. So hang in there with us. We know, Mr. Gutierrez, that we have at least one of your kids on. Let me see who is it? It's Elizabeth who's on.
Yeah.
And she's watching on the YouTube
okay.
channel, so you can say hello to Elizabeth.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then so Johnny has a few other questions, but we also want to, kind of capture some other parts of your life because, the war ends in 45. I think that you're out by late in 44,
Yeah.
and then there's there's a whole other part of your life that that is like very, very interesting as well.
I want to be sure and ask this question if it's not in it. How did we get the name Devil's Brigade?
Yeah, it was.
So we'll get to that
Okay.
when we come back. All right.
Okay.
So stay with us. We will be back here in another minute and a half or so.
Kevin Shropshire. I'm from McAllen, Texas, and I'm a contributor now.
My name is Edward Wallace. I'm from McAllen, Texas. I have a family membership here.
Great opportunity for us to be able to be part of something that was totally Valley.
Yeah, it's good to have something that's totally Valley because, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think there are any other museums of this quality.
When I see the place from the outside and I walk in and I have anything to do with just being in the museum, I'm like, this is a really cool place.
I don't have any memberships with any other museums. I find I get my money's worth here. One thing is in the bookstore, they have a great book collection there and other things, and you get a discount when you're a friend here at the museum.
The Museum of South Texas History really relies upon the input and the participation, and that includes financial participation of its community.
It's nice to be able to say, well, I'm doing some little bit to help it, because I know it's a huge deal to keep this place open every year.
That it's very fun and educational, and there's many events, and like Pioneer Day and the puppet shows and summer nights at the museum.
This is a really, really fundamental institution. It's a beautiful place. It does really, really important work. It's an attractive exhibition. It's a teacher of our history. You get to be a small but important part of that by just being a member.
You should be a member. This is something important to us to preserve our history. If y'all don't do it, it's gone. If you don't want to support this museum, a lot of that rich history is going to be gone forever.
All right, so welcome back to Museum Pláticas, hosted by the Museum of South Texas History, and I'd just like to review who's here today. We have 100-year-old centennial before us, Mr. Eugene Gutierrez, and so we're talking about his World War II experience, and how special is that? Remarkable how Mr. Gutierrez talks about the day, a date which will live in infamy, as President FDR noted on his radio address. And so he actually has a very vivid recollection of that. He shared that, which anybody can see. After this program, this will be posted on our Facebook page, on our YouTube page, and so you can go and see the entire conversation, the entire plática that we're having here. And so we also have a museum employee, Johnny Juan Gonzáles from Mercedes, Texas, who works here at the museum. And so we also have people out there watching. And so Mr. Gutierrez's daughter, for example, Elizabeth, has been feeding us with certain information, and we appreciate that. And Elizabeth, I also have to note that it was you who triggered this here. You called a few weeks ago and said, you know, my father's got a compelling story. And so we, of course, knew of your father's story because it's been out in the newspapers and it's such a special story. And so we wanted to then follow up on your call and do this. And so, Johnny, I'm going to pass it over to you because you have questions that you want to engage Mr. Gutierrez with, and things that he wants to talk about as well.
Of course. Thank you very much. Mr. Gutierrez, I want to talk now about the unit that you were in. I mentioned it before that you were in the 1st Special Service Brigade.
Yes.
And for those of you that don't know, that is the forerunner for our today's modern special forces. So not only were you making history, you were in a history-making unit. And when you all went overseas and started fighting the Nazis, they suddenly became aware of the change in training, of the change of warfare that they were facing. They were no longer facing conventional forces. They were facing a special group of elite soldiers trained to fight, and they were called the Devil's Brigade. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Okay, I'll start out with this. Maybe I get a step ahead of me, but let's come back to this. Now, we captured over 30,000 Germans. A small unit like that, you know, that's quite
That's 3 divisions.
yeah. Plus, we lost to the enemy, I think it was 300 plus lives, and of course almost 110 wounded. But going back to the number of killed in action, the killed ratio for our unit was for every American soldier killed, over 30 Germans died. See?
So it was a real battle of attrition.
Yeah, yeah. So we had a very high return, make them pay for one life. So there were a lot of them. Now, in the interrogation of German prisoners, it came out that the commander of the German forces at Anzio told his men, for every American you capture, I'm going to give you a 30-day furlough. See, and that was how much they wanted information about us, because they thought they were fighting 2 divisions.
Wow. And it was only a brigade.
Yeah, just a brigade. Now, most of our fighting at Anzio especially was night fighting. We never did go out there in the daytime.
And that's the other thing that I read about the Devil's Brigade is you all specialized in warfare at night.
Yeah, and in fact, part of the manuals on night fighting were part of the things that we were doing. Going back to the night fighting, they ran into a dead German. He was fighting us in the front, facing us. And they took some of his personal things, diary, and it was evaluated by the intelligence at the force. And they found an entry in his book. He says, "We are afraid for nightfall to come, because at night black devils are all over us. We don't know which way they're coming, or we don't hear them, we don't see them." So they were feeling the pressures for a small unit.
And that's what a small unit that's trained to fight in an elite fashion. That's what they produce. So you all were producing your own psychological warfare on the enemy.
That's right.
And you all used shoe shine polish to blacken up the face.
Right.
For the night
carbon black.
operations.
Yeah. And going back to the what you mentioned about the shoe shine polish, and that's why the reason we painted our faces black was, a lot of people don't know that in a dark setting, your skin will shine. So that gives you away. So that's why we put black carbon or shoe polish on our faces.
So you all definitely made an impact in the Italian campaign.
Yeah.
Switching over to France, I wanted to talk about the main weapon that the Germans had on the French coast, which was their Tiger tanks.
Yeah.
Could you have a story to tell about a Tiger tank? Could you share that with us?
Okay.
Mr. Gutierrez, I'm going to ask if for this story, if you could maybe talk to the camera, Mr. Gutierrez, just so we can
okay.
capture you telling that story of the Tiger tank.
All right. We had been on the front lines at Enzo 99 days without any relief, no relief at all. Straight through 99 days is a pretty heavy thing. We were living in foxholes like animals, rats do, and that was our only way of staying alive. And we had a breakthrough that was done on May 24, when we started the offensive to capture Rome from the Germans. We started that campaign. After coming back, we rested for about a week and regroup and retrain a little bit. So then the night of the 23rd, they bussed us as far as they could to the front. And the next morning, which was the 24th, that's when our offensive started clicking. The Germans knew that we were coming, so they laid fire in front of ours and all around for almost 6 hours, trying to use that firepower as a psychological warfare, because they knew then that they were facing a very strong fighting unit. So then after the fire, well, that night there were 3 divisions on the. It was kind of like an arc. We were on the right side. And from this point across the arc was approximately 21 miles. Now, they assigned us 8 miles of that arc, while the other big divisions, which number maybe 10,000 to 12,000 men in each division, had the other, let's say, 18 miles of front. So we were doing covering more front lines than 3 divisions or 2 divisions could. Why they did that? Because of our training, of our preparation, our spirit, the core. The Germans wrote, like I said, this officer that was killed, in his diary he put down, we were afraid for nighttime because the devils are all around us. Yeah.
So, and that reputation followed to France, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And so, going back to the story about the Tiger tank.
Yeah. Okay. That night, when the Germans subsided their fire, and then we started. Our artillery started shooting at them, and then we started moving, went over the fence and started chasing the Germans. And at that time, we moved so fast that we left our flank open, our left flank, and there was an airborne regiment too, 504, I think there was on our left, and they weren't moving at all.
Yeah.
So they left the gap open. The Germans found that out, so they came around the back, and we lost over 30 men there on account of that mistake that they did. So some of the men were evacuated, and some were not. They were not able. At least one who had body was an explosion from a mortar there. It ripped his stomach wide open.
Yeah.
And they couldn't bring him back with him, so they put him under a culvert of a railroad crossing. And that was about 8 o'clock in the morning. And when we realized what was going on, and that actually we were able to close that gap.
Okay.
And this particular buddy, or my brother fighter, was put in there for protection because they couldn't carry him. They didn't have a stretcher, so I was in the back rear of the line, and they asked for volunteers. They said, "This is a very risky operation. We cannot tell you go get him because it's dangerous." So they didn't want anybody to take command and be responsible to send 2 men behind the German lines.
To recover.
So when they approached us, or me, they said, "If you want to volunteer, that's your prerogative." And I started thinking, he's not going to be saved. The only way is for somebody to go after him. Suppose that was me there. I immediately thought about myself going in there, exposing myself to the German fire. So I told the sergeant, I says, I'll volunteer to go behind, but I got to know exactly where the body is, where the wounded. And then I asked, they said, "You need 1 more. Do you know anybody?" So I called my buddy if he wanted to go with me. And he volunteered. He was about my height because we needed to have equalization of height when you carry a litter. And his name was Tony Paulus. He was a Greek from Iowa. So we started out crawling. We left our line and went over. And the body, from the point where we started to where the body was about 800 meters. It was a good distance. So halfway, we ran into one of our men who had stayed behind with a machine gun firing. He kept firing one section that was still hot. And he asked me, "You guys have a hard time. You're going to be in a lot of danger. There's 2 snipers in that area there that they have been shooting at me. They haven't hit me yet, but he was fooling them, going to different locations." And he says, "But if somebody can help me, I'll go after that SOB." He said, "Well," I says, "what is it that you want?" "Well, I want you to come and take care of this. Keep firing this machine gun constantly for as long as the ammunition is there." So I says, "Well, before I can do that, I'm under the Geneva Convention regulations. I had a Red Cross armband and a Red Cross on my helmet." He says, "But that doesn't mean that they're not going to shoot at you." So I says, "Well, but if I was there, I would want somebody to take me out of here." So we did. I went over to remove my Red Crosses and kept on firing the machine gun to the area that he designated. About 15 minutes later, he comes back, crawls back, and he says, "You don't have to worry about that. That SOB is dead now." he found him.
Oh,
and
that's
killed
great.
him.
That's great. It's
So we put him in the stretcher, and as we started to come back, here comes this big German tank. With that gun going like this, up and down. Boy, that's scary.
Well, I can imagine.
And you know, they can fire 88s every, I think the firing time between the two shells is 7 or 8 seconds.
Okay, so
One
that's
right
pretty
after
quick
another.
rate of fire.
Yeah, it is. And you know, an 88, if you've ever been behind one of those, it's a very, very high velocity shell. So as we start moving, I told my buddy, says, let's go to that farmhouse and go inside and take some protection there, because that tank was hunting for us. So as soon as we get inside of the farmhouse, he started to shoot armor-piercing shells,
Ouch.
trying to knock the roof on top of us down. And those things were just whizzing right on through. It was dusty. I couldn't have seen your face there at this distance. And so what I did, I said, let's get in this little corner here. And I told Tony, you cover that end, and then I'll cover this end and go put my head over your waist and to keep the dust from getting into his wound. Because I literally, before we picked them up, I had to get all the guts. They were laying down on the side and push them in. And I told him, cross your arms and grab your pants, and because they're going to be holding your stomach shut so the intestines will come out. And we're going to be running. We might be crawling, but this way you won't lose any of your intestines here. So that's what we did, and that tank just finally, there were 2 P-51 Mustangs flying cover.
Angels in the sky.
Yeah, so they saw the tank, I guess, shooting at us, and they made one pass, and they dropped some high explosives, and either they knocked the tank out, or the tank got scared, because if they get hit with a bomb, you know, it's going to set them up on fire. So they made another pass and dropped more bombs on him, and that quieted the tank. I guess he got out of there or took cover. Then we picked up the litter, and we went out the back door, and we had gone about 200 meters, and then the same planes came back flying about, maybe they were at least 200 meters or 400 meters off from the ground. And I remember they saw us with the litter, and then one of the pilots started giving us a thumbs up. So I says, well, that's a good sign. We can walk without any danger of the tank. So we made it back to our lines like that.
That's an amazing
Yeah.
story. That is truly amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
Is that, Mr. Gutierrez, the story that was the significant data for the Medal of Honor?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this is a story that would not have been public until just a few years ago.
Yeah.
Because this story, the way you described it, is a very harrowing story
Yeah.
of great courage and great heroism.
Yeah.
You would not have told in 1945. You would not have told in 1950. You wouldn't have told in 1960.
No.
You told the story in 2014 or something.
Yeah, one of my granddaughters, the one who lives in California, she was writing an essay in her senior year of English, and they asked them to interview military people. So when she called me, I said, sure. So we had several conferences over the phone, and she wrote it, and we sent it in, but that's when, President Bush received it and nothing was done. Then Obama came in and we resent it and nothing was done. And I don't know, maybe I'll have some other information and run it again. But,
Okay.
yeah.
It is hard, especially after the fact, to receive recognition. And in the past, in our military's past, awards did have the sting of racism a little bit
Well,
in awarding
yeah.
awards.
Yeah.
That's the newer military has changed. I know under Obama they passed or they were authorized to do an official review of all Silver Star medals and other acts of heroism that they felt might have deserved a higher award. So,
Johnny, if I may, I'd like to.
yes.
This is a letter that was sent to President Obama by First Special Service Force Association, John Hart,
Yeah.
where he wrote, Mr. President, he says, I have known Eugene Gutierrez since 2002 through the annual reunions of the First Special Service Force. I have had the great pleasure of escorting Gene and several other members of the First Special Service Force Association to the battlefields, to cemeteries, and many villages they liberated in Italy and France during World War II. It was during the latest tour in 2014 when Gene began to reflect back to the Anzio beachhead during the breakout to Rome on May 23, 1944. As Gene related his story, I began to realize that we had been to this place. I informed Gene that we had been there in December 2013. Everything sounded so familiar. May 23rd, 1944, May 23rd, was the worst single-day casualty rate the 1st Special Service Force suffered during the war. Gene and his comrades had spent 99 days of bitter fighting prior to the breakout. The next day, a small group of us traveled to the Anzio Beach head, where thousands of Allied troops had broken out that day in 1944. As we walked through the field and up to the railway track, Gene talked about the incident. According to the official records, maps, and Gene's summary, it all fit.
Yeah.
And so he's writing this to the president
Yeah.
as part of the argument. But the story you're telling is that
It's amazing.
that's an amazing story that you're telling, Mr. Gutierrez. But this story was you held on to this story for a number of years.
Yes, I did. I just never thought what it would come to, and I figured, well, maybe it's something that can come back later. So
And it was your granddaughter that kind of triggered this through her inquiry for a school
Yeah.
assignment.
yeah, that's right.
Makes full circle.
Yeah.
Wow. What's your granddaughter's name?
Eden. Yeah, Eden. She's graduated from SMU a year ago, and she's in law school now. Yeah.
Wow.
I have another granddaughter. Let's see, great daughter. Margaret's daughter. Her name is Tori. She is now at Brown University in Providence, I think. She received a 4-year scholarship, everything paid up.
That's awesome.
4 years of it. Books, tuition, living. So she
So-
got very good grades.
You yourself, Mr. Gutierrez, went to college.
Yes, yes.
After the war, you went to college. Talk about that and then what that would do for you for the rest of your life.
Well, like I mentioned prior, that I wanted a college education. I couldn't, my parents couldn't afford it. So that's why I joined the Army. I said, well, I'll join the Army and save at $21, save money to at least pay a couple of years. And that was my reason for going into the military. And it turns out that I had saved more than what 2 years would pay for, and got the GI Bill right, and I was able to get 2 degrees under the GI Bill.
That's awesome.
Out of it was Oklahoma A&M when I was there in 46, 47, 48, and I got my first degree in 49, class of 49. Then I spent another extra year, and I got a master's degree a year later.
That's amazing. After having gone through that that growing up in your lifetime with the depression, the droughts, going to war, experiencing the hazards of war, coming back and finding it within yourself to go to college and to achieve. It took me a while to be able to go to college because I left the military and I had some problems that I had to work out. So I'm glad to see that you were able to succeed through all this.
Well, I came out of the Army, discharged August 28th, and by January of the following year, I was already in school. Yeah.
Well, it took me a while, but I recently finished my degree with the University of UTRGV.
Yeah.
And it took a while, but I finally got it done. So after you got your degrees, you went into education, correct?
Yes, yeah.
What drove you to that field?
Well, when I was getting preparation of selecting a school, the VA gave me an analysis test of what I could maybe have as a major. And they decided, well, you can teach industrial education arts because of the score that I made on their preparation for GIs coming back to college. And it worked out all right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
So where did you work when you came out of college, even with a master's degree in 1950 maybe or so?
1 or 2. Well, I started teaching in 1951. No, 1950. I graduated, got my BS in 49. So I stayed there that summer, got more work on my master's, came home. In fact, I was going to go to design school in Chicago Art Institute and become a furniture designer. And when I came home, and on my way back I had to pick up my equipment that I had stored there at college, and we started talking, and one of the guys says, why don't you just stay another year and work on your master's here, and then you can go to the other school. So I said, well, I had my mind set on going to the Chicago Art Institute right now, but let me give it a try. So I ended up staying at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma A&M then. Yeah.
And then after that year, you came back home.
Yeah, and in '50 I started teaching with the McAllen School District in industrial arts education. And I was there 3 years, and then I was asked if I wanted a principalship. I says, well, I need to have money. I'm going to get married one of these days. So I stayed and got a master's there, and then I got a promotion from classroom to principalship.
What school did you start teaching in?
Sam Houston,
And then you would become an administrator at which campus?
at Navarro Elementary. Yeah.
At Navarro in McAllen. And you were there for how many years?
Well, I was at that school 18 years as a principal, and then they reassigned me to middle school. I went to Lincoln, and I was there 9 years after that, so I put in 30 years with the district.
Now, Navarro had a distinction at the time, didn't it? In the early 1950s, it was a school for certain kids.
Well, no, that was a handicapped school.
Mm.
That was Thigpen School, I think, or Roosevelt School. I
Roosevelt.
think.
Okay.
Yeah, Roosevelt. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you were a principal in McAllen, how was that experience for you? You were a very young man,
Yeah.
having served in World War II. What was that like for you?
Well, I think I made the adjustment pretty good because haven't had to learn discipline yourself. I was very concerned about the discipline of the kids, and some of those kids had no discipline at all. Yeah.
Mm. You must have been one of the very first Mexican-American principals.
That was the first one. Yeah, I was the first Mexican-American in McAllen. Yeah. So I broke the barrier there.
How about that? Wow. And you continue to work in education until you retired.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I retired in 1980. Yes.
Who did you marry, and when was it that you married her?
Well, I married in '51 to a young lady from Mercedes.
Hoy no más.
Yeah, Emma Peña. Her father was a carpenter there in Mercedes in 1951, 52,
My dad
53.
might know.
Yeah.
Where did, well, Johnny's dad might know her because Johnny's dad is
93.
93.
Oh, but
Yeah.
maybe they went to school together.
I think so. They
Because
might be.
Emma is 93, no?
Yes, yeah, 93.
How about that?
That's
And
amazing.
So where did you meet Emma? Do you remember the day when you met her?
I do. I tell people that she was a substitute blind date. My cousin, Joe Sanchez, was head of a surgical department at Valley Baptist in Harlingen. And I had gone home after I started working on my master's in 50, Christmas 50. And he called me like today and says, when are you leaving? I says, I'm leaving tomorrow. How would you like to have a date tonight? Be your last date here in Harlingen. Says, okay. Well, he set the arrangement that afternoon she would come out from surgery to meet her. So the friend's name, nurse, was Margaret. And he said, her name is Margaret, and she's going to meet you at the parking lot after she gets off duty at 3 o'clock, so you know who she is. So I did that, and then I waited and waited, and then out comes Penny. She says, Margaret couldn't make it. She got called for surgery. So I'm available. I can go with you. So that's why I say she's a substitute blind date.
Maybe they were looking out the window and seeing, who was going to fight over you.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe.
You don't know that. You don't know. We don't. So, but you called her Penny.
Yeah, that's she got that name in nursing school at Santa Rosa Hospital in San Antonio. They started calling her Penny for Peña. I think they couldn't pronounce Peña. It's a penny, so those are pennies. So they said, "You're Penny."
So, Penny, Emma, would have become a nurse as a very young woman.
Yeah,
Because she would have
I think
finished.
she was maybe 21 or somewhere in there from high school, and it took 3 years, I think, for a nursing degree or a nursing registered nurse.
So you've been married to Emma for now 70
Yeah,
70 years.
70.
Wow.
From 51 to 70 is 80.
71 years. Yeah.
71 years.
What day did you marry in 51?
The second day, June 2nd.
June 2nd. Wow. Well, congratulations to you
Oh, thank you.
and to Emma as well. And how many children did you have?
2 daughters and 1 son.
And do you have the number of grandchildren that you have?
Well, I have 4.
And you have great grandchildren now.
One daughter, 1 grandchild.
Wow. Mr. Gutierrez, congratulations to you, and thank you so much for your service, not only in the military, but just as a good human being.
Well, thank you. Appreciate your thoughts and your,
Yeah. And Johnny, thank you also for your service. You have come out big, Mr. Gutierrez. Thank you so much
you're
for your
welcome.
service. Mr. Gutierrez, is there anything else that you want to say before we sign off on this program?
I have a blank check here. You want to sign it?
He's a funny guy as well. That's terrific.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah, I know you are. I know you are. So this is.
And I have some witnesses.
Yeah, I
here,
know.
too.
I see them. So this has been a terrific way to put a cap on our Veterans Day, week that we've done. Actually, we've done a couple of weeks here at the museum. Mr. Gutierrez and to Johnny, on behalf of the Museum of South Texas History, thank you so much for your service and for just being good people.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
It was
It
fun.
was a lot of fun.
It was fun.
Yeah.
And so with that, we will sign off, Tony. And so thank you to friends of the Museum of South Texas History for joining us on the November 2021 installment of Museum Pláticas. And we'll see you again next month.